On this episode of Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, join me, Belinda Brady, as I take a dive into the tragic story of 14-year-old Leigh Leigh, the girl who went to a 16th birthday party on the beach and never came home. Coming up right after this. Hi everybody and welcome to Crime Scenes with Coffee Beans, True Aussie Murders Caffeinated. I am your host, Belinda Brady, and welcome guys. Welcome to my little podcast where I talk about Australian murders. And just to give you a little bit of context, this is something I have wanted to do for such a long time and then finally took the leap. And the fact that you guys are listening to me means the absolute world to me. So thank you guys so much. I'd love to give a shout out to you guys listening at home and also to the folks who have subscribed to me on YouTube. And if you want to join the gang, please come join us. We don't bite. Thank you guys so much for listening to me. You can subscribe to me, you can buy me a coffee, and you can send me a text. And I just want to start this episode by saying that I will be taking a little break after this episode, but we are not breaking up, I promise you. I'm just taking some time off to recharge, a little R&R, but I will be back in early July. And in the meantime, I'm going to re-upload some of my most popular episodes in case any of you have missed them so you can then catch up. Now, this episode is titled Leigh Leigh, Death on the Beach, and I will give you a warning straight away. This talks about rape and murder and the sexual assault of a young girl. So if this is distressing to you, listener discretion is advised. Now, what am I drinking? At the moment, I'm recording this on Good Friday, and happy Easter to my listeners who celebrate it. And everything is shut. So I've already had my Macca's drive-through coffee. So now I'm having a black coffee with s'mores syrup. And sometimes it's what you know and love. And I'm really, really enjoying this one today. My sources for this episode are 7news.com.au, findagrave.com, abc.net.au, theage.com, and smh.com.au. So wherever you are in the world, whether you're at work or you're at home or you're chilling or you're gymming or you're driving, lend me your ears, get comfy, make sure you've got something caffeinated, something you love to drink, ready to go. And let's get started. Episode 22, Leigh Leigh, Death on the Beach. Now, male violence against women sadly is nothing new. It's been around since the dawn of time, and it will be around until we draw our last breath. We can raise awareness of it, of course, and of course we should be, and we always will be. And we will educate our sons and our fathers and the men in our lives, but sometimes that is just not enough, and it happens, and sadly it will keep happening. The story I'm about to tell you about a 14-year-old schoolgirl by the name of Leigh Leigh, who was raped and left for dead at a birthday party on a Newcastle beach in the Australian state of New South Wales, is as horrific as it is heartbreaking. And what happened to her that night she died is beyond disgusting. The poor girl suffered at the hands of not one, but several males who, like a pack of rabid dogs who saw an opportunity to take advantage of a helpless rabbit, they saw the opportunity to take advantage of a young drunk girl. And the victim blaming, blame shifting, and lack of remorse that followed is absolutely appalling. Leigh Leigh died a horrible, horrible death, and we're going to talk about it for her voice and her story needs to be heard. Leigh Leigh was born Leigh Rihanna Mears, but she is known as Leigh Leigh, so for this podcast, I will call her that. And she was born to parents Robin and Robert Mears on the 24th of July, 1975. Her parents split when she was around 7, and her mum remarried, and her baby sister Jessie was born in 1983. Jessie's dad and Leigh's stepdad have the surname of Leigh, and that is how the name Leigh Leigh was born. At the time of her death, Leigh lived with her mother, her stepfather Brad Sherman, and her sister in Fern Bay, a suburb in the Newcastle, New South Wales area. She was in Year 8 at Newcastle High School and wanted to become a vet. On the weekends, she hung out with her cousin and best friend Tracy, where they liked going to the movies, roller skating, and just hanging about. Leigh was also close to her grandmother and spent a lot of time with her. Both Leigh's mother and her grandmother described Leigh as your typical teenager. Now, Stockton, New South Wales is not your typical beach town, like not your coastal town in New South Wales, Australia. This beautiful part of Australia's east coast is 32 kilometres or 20 miles long and stretches to Anna Bay. It is the site of numerous shipwrecks and aircraft crashes, and during World War II, it was fortified against possible attack by the Japanese. It was used as a bombing and gunnery range, and nowadays, the beach is a popular place for campers and families who want to get away, get on the beach and have a bit of a nice time together. And though its history is quite unique, the culture sadly is not. It's your typical anywhere in Australia town with mateships and secrets and little cliques. And when Leigh Leigh was murdered, the aftermath really shone a light on how far people would go to protect their friends or themselves, or just stay out of it because that's not my business. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. The 3rd of November was a cool pre-summer's evening, and Leigh Leigh was excited to be attending the 16th birthday party of a fellow Newcastle High student by the name of Jason Robertson. A lot of teens were excited about this party, and it was a chance for them to cut loose after a long school year that was just about to wrap up. The party was held at the North Stockton Surf Club, and though police said around 60 teens were in attendance, media had reported it was closer to 100. Most of the teens at the party were Year 10 students, 2 years older than Leigh Leigh, and there was a lot of alcohol, marijuana, and sex. Leigh Leigh was allowed to go to the party on the grounds that she met her stepfather and her mother, who were going to pick her up at 11 p.m. That was the conditions. Leigh Leigh's mother was also assured there were going to be responsible adults supervising the party. And Leigh Leigh was really excited to go because this was the first party she had ever been invited to. So she was allowed to go on those conditions. Things turned bad pretty quickly for the excited Leigh Leigh after she was given a bottle of Jim Beam to drink, and she did. So it was Jim Beam mixed with Coke, and Leigh Leigh got drunk very, very quickly, which is often the case with young kids and alcohol, especially strong alcohol like Jim Beam. And a 15-year-old who was at the party was quoted as saying, "I'm going to go and fuck Leigh." He was then seen walking towards the beach with Leigh Leigh, who was so drunk he almost had to carry her. When Leigh Leigh returned to the party sometime later, apparently she was bleeding between her legs, distressed, crying and begging for help. Some partygoers tried to console her, and she had stated she had been raped and that the boy who walked her to the beach was the one who had raped her, and she said she hated him. Now, the supervision at this party, the so-called adult supervision, was an 18-year-old by the name of Matthew Webster and his mate Guy Wilson. Now, you and I both know, even listening to this, 18-year-olds supervising a 16-year-old's birthday party where there is drugs and alcohol and sex, it was never going to be a good thing. But anyway, that's what's happened. And Matthew Webster was quoted as saying early on in the night to another party goer, "Hey dude, we're going to get Leigh pissed and all go through her." Now his mate, the other adult supervision, Guy Wilson, went over to the distressed Leigh and put his arm around her, and instead of asking her if she was okay, he asked her for sex. When she refused, he pushed the drunk, upset 14-year-old to the ground, where Webster and around 10 other boys surrounded the terrified girl, yelling at her, kicking her, and pouring beer on her and spitting on her. This was witnessed by several people, yet not one single person intervened or tried to help Leigh Leigh. Not one. No police were called, no parents were called, nothing. Leigh was completely helpless and completely on her own. Now, Leigh managed to get herself up off the sand, and that is when the assault stopped. And she staggered to the clubhouse where the boys followed her and continued their assaults. And again, no one helped her. And I will never understand how you could stand by and watch that happen and not go over and intervene or call a parent or call the police or tell the boys to stop. I will never, ever understand that mentality. And Leigh was last seen leaving the beach club alone, distressed and drunk at around 10:30 p.m. that night. Leigh's mother and her stepdad arrived to pick their daughter up as planned at 11 p.m, but Leigh was nowhere to be found. Now, several partygoers helped Leigh's stepdad try to find her, but to no avail. And they then decided to wait for her at home, assuming she had gone to one of her friends' places after the party. Now, we've got to remember, people, this was before mobile phones or cell phones, so they had no way of contacting Leigh Leigh to see where she was at. And when Leigh failed to show up the following morning, panic set in and her stepdad returned to the beach to look for her with several teens who were at the party in tow to help him. Leigh's body was found in the sand dunes, which was about 90 metres or 300 feet away from the clubhouse. She was naked except for her shoes and socks, her underwear and shorts around her right ankle. She was on her back, legs spread. Her bra was found nearby, as was her shirt and jumper, which were both stained with alcohol. A bloodied rock, which weighed around 5.6 kilos, which was around 12 pounds, was found nearby, and blood stains were found up to 2.8 metres, 9 feet away from her body. The written invitation to the 16th birthday party was still in her pocket. A postmortem revealed Leigh's cause of death was a fractured skull and injury to her brain. Leigh had been struck with force several times and at least 3 times in the head. She had injuries to her jaw, ribs, liver and right kidney. She had been choked before she died. She had deep bruising to her vagina and 2 tears on her vulva. A forensic expert speculated that that kind of damage could have been made by an inflexible object, such as a beer bottle. No semen was found in her body. Her blood alcohol was 0.128, a level which would have caused significant impairment of motor coordination and a loss of judgment. 14-year-old Leigh Leigh died drunk and scared whilst being attacked by a stranger who was meant to help and protect her. Her last moments, her last hours at that party would have been absolutely terrifying. Now, naturally, Leigh Leigh's family were absolutely devastated at the murder of their little girl, and the town of Stockton was in shock and in damage control. Leigh Leigh's death made news all over the country and attracted attention far and wide, all of us wanting to know how the hell does a 14-year-old go to a party and not come home. Initially, 20 detectives were assigned to the case, but within a matter of weeks that was reduced to less than 10. Crime reporter at the time, journalist Mark Riley, wrote that the police were being thorough and going through the extensive process of cross-checking stories and interviewing witnesses. But behind the scenes, kids were being told not to talk, not to blab, and if they were asked, they were to lie. Other girls were threatened with the same fate as Leigh if they talked, and the kids were worried about the repercussions of saying what they saw, or were worried about what their parents would say, as some kids weren't even meant to be at this party. Then came the wild conspiracy theories that police were running a teenage drug ring and Leigh was killed because she threatened to talk. Another vulgar rumour getting around was Leigh had been murdered by her stepfather and that she had been sleeping with him for months and that's why she'd been murdered. This, of course, was not true. None of it was true. But sadly, as reported by Mark Riley, police said they heard the rumour so much that they did have suspicions about Leigh's stepfather, Brad Sherman, but once a suspect was identified and arrested for Leigh's murder, they realised the accusation was nothing more than salacious rumours. 3 suspects emerged early in the investigations, one being Matthew Webster, the other Guy Wilson, and a boy only known as NC1 because he was under the age of 18 at the time. In an interview on the 5th of November, NC1 admitted to having sex with Leigh, but said it was consensual. He denied any wrongdoing, but then went on to admit pushing Leigh, pouring beer over her and spitting on her, as well as throwing an empty beer bottle at her. Matthew Webster also admitted to pouring beer on the drunk girl, but denied sexually assaulting or killing her. Now, as this was before DNA, police could only take blood from the suspects on the hope they would have a match, like if there had been blood of theirs left on at the murder scene or on Leigh Leigh herself. So clothing was taken from the suspects. The clothing they were wearing at the party was taken off the suspects, but Matthew Webster gave police a different set of clothing. Now, on the 16th of November, Matthew Webster pleaded guilty to assaulting Leigh Leigh and for supplying cannabis to a minor. He was released on bail with a hearing set for February of 1990. And on January 19th, Guy Wilson was also charged with assaulting Leigh and also released on bail pending sentencing. So he too admitted his part in assaulting Leigh. But for Matthew Webster, he was quickly losing his cool, and on the 28th of January, he assaulted a boy who was taunting him about Leigh, and while being interviewed, while he was on bail, he then assaulted this boy, was taken in for questioning, and then while he was being interviewed, he confessed to killing Leigh Leigh. In the interview transcript, he can be heard denying it, but then without being prompted, he confesses by stating, well, I did it, but I just can't believe it happened. It's just unbelievable. Webster then went on to tell police exactly what had happened that night. He said he was in the sand dunes looking for his stash of beer when he saw Leigh. He told police he felt he was right for a root, and those of us who are not Australians who are listening to this, root is a Aussie slang term for sex. So he told the police he felt he was right for a root and Leigh was his target. Now, at 110 kilos, Webster easily overpowered the intoxicated and distressed teen. He put his hand around her throat and dragged her into the salt bush. He told police, I think I had her down and had me hand across her throat so she couldn't make any noise. Webster pushed her to the ground and took off her clothes. He told police, I think I had her down and had me hand across her throat so she couldn't make any noise. I think I took her top off and she rolled over. She started crawling away and I grabbed her by the feet and pulled her back. I then pulled her pants down. He then sexually assaulted Leigh while she was on the ground trying to get away. Webster said he lost his temper when Leigh continued to struggle and reject him, and this on top of the worry that she would tell people that he had sexually assaulted her led him to the decision that he just had to kill her. Webster then choked her but stopped because I didn't think it was working. He then spotted the nearly 6-kilo lump of concrete and told police, I picked it up and went back and hit her with it. He said he delivered 2 strong blows to her head, which caved her head in. Leigh died instantly. Webster left her where she died, half naked, bloodied, and alone. He washed her blood from his hands from a tap at the nearby boat ramp and headed home. On the way, he stopped to chat to a few mates at a pizza shop called Roberto's Pizza, and he was home by 11 p.m. Webster appeared in court on the 19th of February and was refused bail. On the 21st of March, while in police custody, Webster was convicted and fined $250 for the assault on the boy who was taunting him in the street after Leigh's murder. The convictions then rolled out thick and fast, and NC1 was sentenced to 6 months in detention for having sex with Leigh, who was under the age of consent at the time. It was speculated that he wasn't charged with rape as there simply wasn't enough evidence to prove it. This sentence was later reduced to 100 hours of community service as the judge thought NC1 would benefit from helping the community as opposed to being badly influenced whilst in detention. On the 19th of March, Wilson was sentenced to 6 months jail for his part in assaulting Leigh Leigh. Matthew Webster was charged with sexual assault, but those charges were dropped by the time he stood trial, and it was speculated that they had been dropped in exchange for a guilty plea for the murder charge. Webster pled guilty to Leigh's murder on the 24th of October in 1990, and in doing this meant no witnesses were called to trial. Justice James Roland Wood sentenced Matthew Webster to a minimum 14 years in jail, with an additional 6 in which he would be eligible for parole. Wood found Webster's motivation to be his fear that Leigh would tell others about her sexual assault at his hands, and a psychological report stated Webster attacked Leigh not so much because she would not let him have sex with her, but because she became the living proof that even a slut, a property of the clan, thought he was not good enough to have sex with. 5 residents of Stockton gave character references on Webster, stating he was a gentle giant from a good family, while others who knew him scoffed at this and described him as Fat Matt, the thug of Stockton. And though it was widely speculated that Webster didn't act alone when he killed Leigh, and the events of that night would certainly back those claims up, it was concluded he acted alone. Webster was the first person in New South Wales to be sentenced under the new truth in sentencing laws, which the parents of murdered New South Wales nurse Anita Cobby campaigned strongly for, and I have covered that murder if you want to go and have a listen to that episode. And this meant he would be in jail for those full 14 years and not a day less. Webster appealed his sentence, but this was dismissed. Matthew Webster was released on parole on the 10th of June 2004 after serving 14 and a half years in jail. The conditions of his parole were he was only allowed to visit Newcastle or Stockton with permission from his probation and parole officer. It was thought supervising his reintegration into society was better than just releasing him back onto the streets and seeing what happened. Webster's release was met with no ill thoughts from Leigh's family, and they wished him well in the re-establishment of his life. Webster was arrested again for assault in November of 2004, but the charges were dropped. Now, the media coverage around Leigh Leigh's murder was widespread and heavy, and there was at least 39 stories ran on her murder by the local rag there, the Newcastle Herald, and they ran these stories between 1989 and 1994. And the rumours about what had happened that fateful night, and sadly the victim blaming and, quote, slut shaming was not too far behind. The accusations of Leigh being sexually assaulted by several boys that night all but disappeared within the year of her death, and many believed that because NC1 wasn't charged with rape, Leigh Leigh had been a willing participant, but Leigh Leigh was dead. She couldn't stand up for herself. She couldn't give her version of events. This then led to talk that Leigh Leigh asked for it. there was no rape charge. Oh, she was up for it, and the blame soon turned on her. And like I just said, the girl was dead. She couldn't defend herself. And the media also grabbed onto the psychological report that on Matthew Webster at his sentencing that stated Webster attacked Leigh not so much because she would not let him have sex with her, but because she became a living proof that even a slut, a property of the clan, thought he was not good enough to have sex with. And they completely misconstrued it. They were accused of missing the point completely and zeroing on the word used, slut, and running with it. The media and their coverage of her murder is considered by multiple sources for the switch in attitude towards Leigh Leigh's murder and created a wide culture of victim blaming. And it has to be known, it has to be said again and again that Leigh Leigh was in no way, shape or form responsible for what happened to her that night, drunk or not, at a party or not. Victim blaming is abhorrent, and in this case it is disgusting. She did absolutely nothing wrong. And on top of the aftermath of Leigh Leigh's murder and of her being blamed and shamed for her brutal murder, the police were now facing criticisms of how they handled the case to begin with. They took too long to identify potential perpetrators. It took them months to charge Webster, even though they had found holes in his story a mere 10 days after the murder. He had lied about his whereabouts. He had publicly voiced his intention to have sex with Leigh that night, and he had ample opportunity to do so, yet they took their time getting to him. And there was also criticism about the lack of charges brought against the boys who attacked Leigh that night. The only boy who was charged was NC1, and that was for sex with a minor, not rape, not assault. And the injuries to Leigh Leigh's genitals told a different story. This girl had suffered, this girl had been attacked, yet the charges laid did not reflect that. And Leigh's mother had stated to Radio National that when she queried why others weren't being charged, the detective in charge, Detective Sergeant Caffey, asked her if she knew how much it costs to run an investigation. Like, why should that even matter? Police were also criticised for the lack of forensic testing, which at the time all they had available to them was blood testing because this was before DNA. And they had told Leigh's family they had collected blood and clothing samples from every suspect they had and sent them off to Scotland Yard for testing. But when Leigh's grandmother called asking about them, she'd been told no samples had been sent. The only items that were sent for testing that we know of is the rock that was used to kill Leigh and 3 pieces of her clothing. In 1990, the year after her murder, after being told that no one would be charged with sexually assaulting Leigh Leigh, her mother Robin began a campaign to have her daughter's case officially reopened, which was eventually dismissed. In 1993, Leigh's mother and her sister were awarded $29,000 compensation as part of a victim's compensation case in which they appealed. In 1995, they were awarded an additional $134,000, and the judge who was overlooking the appeal, Judge Joseph Moore, acknowledged that whoever sexually assaulted Leigh had never been brought to justice and named 4 boys in addition to the known boys of NC1, Webster and Wilson as persons of interest. And citing exhaustion and survival, Leigh's mother, Robin, abandoned her efforts to have Leigh's case reopened. I mean, my heart goes out to her. It would have been hell on earth living through what she lived through and trying to get justice for her daughter. I honestly do not say I blame her for just putting her hands up and saying, oh, I'm done. In October of 1996, Police Commissioner Paul Whelan announced that Leigh Leigh's murder would be reviewed. by the New South Wales Crime Commission, and in 1998 they released findings that Webster acted alone and no one else was involved in Leigh's murder. In 1998, police officers were questioned by the Police Integrity Commission, which is also known as the PIC, as well as witnesses from the party and Wilson, Webster and NC1. There were allegations that police assaulted 4 people during interviews, 4 suspects, and Webster stated he was punched and kicked when he refused to confess to Leigh's murder. The police also faced criticism of how they handled interviewing NC1, who was underage and was interviewed without his parents present. And the main line of questioning was about intercourse he had with Leigh and not assaulting her or her murder. The PIC released their findings in October 2000 and recommended Detective Sergeant Chafee, who was in charge of the initial investigation, be dismissed, as well as recommending criminal charges against 5 other police officers. And the review stated that Webster was falsely arrested for the purpose of questioning, and he was probably assaulted in custody. So the police arrested him for the purpose of questioning when they did not have the power to do so at that point. And the accusations that he was assaulted while in custody. Detective Sergeant Chafee dismissed the findings and stated he was proud of his team's work, but went on to retire a little earlier than planned. No charges were laid against any other police officers on the grounds that they had already suffered emotional distress and their careers had been destroyed beyond repair. To date, no one else has been charged with assaulting or sexually assaulting Leigh Leigh that night, and Webster has been out of jail for some time. In 1997, a film based on the tragedy called Black Rock was filmed in Stockton and was met with hostility not only from the locals but from Leigh Leigh's family, who stated that they were feasting on an unfortunate situation and portraying Leigh in a negative light. And there we have it, guys. The heartbreaking story of 14-year-old Leigh Leigh, the girl who was so excited to go to her first ever birthday party, her first ever teenage birthday party, only to end up being sexually assaulted, harassed, teased, and ultimately murdered. This case breaks my heart. The girl who went to a party and never came home, it should never have happened. There should have been more people there to help her, to protect her. And it really needs to be said, please, if you are anywhere and you see anything happening to somebody that seems out of place or makes you feel uncomfortable, please check that they're okay. Go and help if you can. And if you can't, call the authorities. Please get some help. We cannot keep turning a blind eye to this stuff. And that's it, guys. That's it from me for a little bit. Like I said at the beginning of the episode, I'm off for a little bit for some R&R. Don't stress. I promise you I will be back. I will be back early July, fresh as a daisy, new crime scenes, new coffee beans, new crimes to talk about. So please, I will be back. I will be re-uploading some of my more popular episodes for those who are just joining me. If you want to have a trip down memory lane, some of my most popular episodes will be here ready for you to listen to, and you don't have to dig back. You can if you like, but they will be right here, right behind this episode. And as always, subscribe, buy me a coffee, text me, shout out, email me, talk to me on YouTube. I reply to your comments there. Subscribe to me on YouTube. However you want, however you need to do it, I'm here for it. Thank you for lending me your ears, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, stay safe, stay cool, and stay caffeinated. And I promise I will catch you all later.